Okay, this is our first Krown Countdown U web extra. I haven't got a fancy name for it like Overtime U or anything like that, but I know that a number of our viewers are wondering where we are. Well, the show is over on 3 Down Nation online, and it's also on CHCH television Thursday nights at 11:30, and also plays again on Saturdays at 1. In addition to that, since we didn't go over to SaskTel with the Canada West, we're on all the remaining Shaw stations across the Shaw network, and we're broadcast in Regina and parts of Saskatchewan on Access, and we are working on more distribution points as well on top of that. So enough of that in terms of checking your local listings. Let's talk a little bit about football on both sides of the border. And one thing that I found really intriguing when I was looking through the 94 or so Canadians who are playing on the other side of the line, either in Division 1 or Division 2, is pretty well an equal division of guys that decided to jump to academies, or guys that just played at home and then were discovered, or there was a coach selling his wares to NCAA schools and made it out of the Canadian system. Mm-hmm. I think there's good and bad to playing academy football. I think the bad is what it costs you out of your pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it can get crazy sometimes. You're a coach in high school football in British Columbia. What's your take on this?
Well, what you really need as a player is not so much the academy exposure, but you need a coach who's going to push your name out there and get the word out about you. Because there is enough scouting around that colleges will find you, but you do have to have a coach with the right mindset. I've seen examples of guys who were Division I talents that ended up maybe going to Division II or ended up in U Sports, not because they wanted to be in U Sports, but because they didn't get the looks down south. And so it all really comes down to what a coach does for you. And as a head coach in this country, I think that part of your job once your season's done, and even a bit during your season, is to focus your attention on, okay, where am I going to put my guys? How am I going to help them out? It's my job to tell people about what they're like on and off the field and get their name out there.
But Canadian kids going south of the line, going far, far away south of the line, I mean, we see it reverse-wise in hockey with American kids coming up and playing major junior hockey because, you know, they want that kind of opportunity. But kids that come up and play major junior hockey don't have families investing tons of money to play on that major junior team. The junior team's making that investment. What type of dollars are we talking about here, and is it money better spent somewhere else?
Well, if money was the issue, then the academy system wouldn't be a thing. Like you are investing a whole bunch of money in the off chance that you get a full ride scholarship somewhere. I think my personal opinion is I think it's crazy to do that. But it works in terms of those guys seem to more consistently be getting into the Division I level compared to your average high school across the country. But I mean, I don't know. I don't really support the whole academy system. For starters, I think the academy part of it is kind of a joke. I think that it really downplays academics. And for me, for those of you who don't know, I'm also an educator. That's what I do for a profession. And so for me, that's something that I don't really like about it either.
What does it do to player supply, though? I know with certain programs in certain parts of the country, if you build around a quarterback, and I'm thinking more locally here in Vancouver with Terrell Jano a couple of years ago, came up to his grade 11 year, pulled the plug on competing here, went south of the line. That really hurt that STM program.
Sure did,
and it really hurt the development of players around that position as well. What can programs in Canada do? What can they do to offer maybe something a little more to the athlete, or should they be trying to offer something more to the athlete?
Well, I mean, it would be nice, but like the example you used, Terrell Jana came out of a school called St. Thomas More Collegiate, which is a private Catholic school in this area. It's they run out of a really nice building. You know, they've got a lot of bells and whistles and things like that. It's a very good student experience anyway. So if that wasn't going to keep a guy like that around, then I don't know what would. And I don't know, like we have an issue with the concept of exceptionalism in this country. We like everybody to be on a level playing field. We don't like to make a big deal out of our athletes and things like that. And I don't know that we will ever get away from that culture. And there's not a lot of, like if a guy decides that he wants to go down south, then you're going to lose him. One of the interesting dynamics that I'm seeing a little bit of is you're starting to see that some of the schools located in more economically friendly areas are having a bigger issue with this than some of your inner city schools. And those schools are starting to have a bit more success because they're not losing these guys down to the States purely because they can't afford it.
What is your take right now on U Sports as we head into week 2 or week 3? I know we've had some discussions off camera about the relative strength or lack of strength in the OUA right now. It looks like they're almost like Quebec in that there's 2 teams and everybody else. Yeah,
well, I've said to you a couple times, I think this is shaping up to be a down year in the OUA as a whole. And one of the teams that you can look to as an example of that, I think, actually is Waterloo, the surprise team out of the gate. And I think the team that could be the first OUA team to go 3-0 based on next weekend's schedule, they're playing the University of Toronto, which would be a huge, huge headline. But for them to turn it around that much in 1 year, and granted their schedule has been fairly easy so far, but for them to move that far up the OUA pecking order, to me is an indication that, yeah, they've gotten significantly better, but is also an indication that a lot of the teams around the middle in the OUA are maybe not quite as strong as they once were. It's been a little bit disappointing to see the lack of entertainment and quality football coming out of teams like Ottawa so far, Carleton, Queens. McMaster's only played the 1 game, so I won't include them in that. Guelph being another one. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. The other conference that I actually am finding quite interesting early on here and can't figure out for the life of me what's going on is the AUS. You know, Acadia gets bombarded in week 1 by Mount Allison, and then week 2, Acadia walks all over Bishops and Mount Allison gets shut out after a week after putting up 64 points. I think that St. Mary's is going to take a step forward this year. How far of a step forward, I don't know. St. FX looks strong, but not as strong as they were. But they looked bad on opening weekend. They looked really good last week, and I have no idea what to make of just about every team in that conference.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned 2 teams, St. Mary's and Waterloo. And I think when you take a look at the coaches, Chris Bertoya in the case of Waterloo, and James Colsey III in the case of SMU, they've both taken different attitudes and different approaches when it comes to recruiting.
Yep.
Trey Ford was lured into Waterloo because Chris Bertoya was willing to give him the chance to play quarterback when so many other programs just saw him as an athlete.
Yep.
So taking that chance, investing some faith in some players, being aggressive, looking in different places. We even see that a little bit with Concordia and Mickey Donovan in terms of some of the places that he's looked for players. Recruiting is so key to this, but also another thing with Waterloo, they have some great facilities coming online as well. And facilities can also be a game changer, can't they?
Yeah, they can. We've seen the pattern developing that investment in your football program and the infrastructure around it tends to pay off on the field. And Waterloo seemed to get that message and have been injecting money into the program. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I heard that was one of the things that Coach Bertoya basically put in his contract was some level of more added investment into the football program in order for him to take that job. Those 2 schools you mentioned and that I guess I had mentioned are a really interesting study because of how different they are as institutions. St. Mary's is an institution that is approaching recruiting much along the lines of the University of Manitoba, going after those guys that are great athletes, not necessarily guys that will get into some of the more academically oriented schools around there. Waterloo, basically the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And Coach Bertoya has talked about how it's important to him to get in guys that will be able to succeed academically at that school as well as on the football field, and that being a big part of their recruiting pitch. Like, look, this is what we do at Waterloo. We are a fantastic academic school. You should be bumping us to the top of the list because of that.
I've gone through the 12 stages with York because, there's Warren Craney working his backside off right now to try to put a competitive team on the field. He went out with the message a couple of years ago, we're going to be playing in this wonderful new Pan Am Stadium.
Yep.
It's year 3. The team isn't in there yet.
Yeah.
It's $60 million paid for by taxpayers or ratepayers or however you want to slice the pie up. You talk about schools putting resources behind teams. Right now, York, for one reason or another, they may have justified reasons, has put a big blue fence up between their team and a key resource. It's absolutely perplexing to me.
Yeah, and much like the professional football league in this country, U Sports still has absolutely no answers for a problem like Toronto. And they've got to figure that out. I think if they're ever going to take that next step into relevance in this country, is got to find out a way to make York and Toronto a part of the crowded Toronto sports scene. Toronto's got that great little venue at Varsity Stadium. I love that facility. It's walking distance from some really nice neighborhoods. York's, I think, a little bit more of a difficult task given where they're located, but that facility, like, they have to be able to get into that facility. And frankly, taxpayers should be demanding that. I mean, that's something that you as a taxpayer and a voter in Ontario should be putting your politicians' feet to the fire and going, look, like, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes here, but we bought you this shiny new stadium and it's barely being used. That's not acceptable to us.
Well, right now it's a big soccer facility that's used by club teams, and that's not good enough for the folks out at York. Anyway, our show is on CHCH TV Thursday nights at 11:30 Eastern Time or 1 o'clock Eastern Time on Saturdays now every week. We're also on 3 Down Nation, and we will be turning out some of these extras. Actually, why don't you just send in a suggestion on what we should name this little extra feature? That we can unveil that next week.
Sure.
What do you think?
We can do that, yeah.
I think we're both worn out. Right now, this is the hottest studio on earth. It's 45 degrees in here.
Yeah, it's boiling in here, and it was last week too.
Yeah.
Hopefully we finally hit some fall weather coming up here soon, because us pasty Vancouverites are not necessarily used to these mid-30s temperatures.
Help, I'm melting. Turn the lights off. And our show will be available over on 3 Down Nation on Wednesday.